I think some of those main themes that come out of ACA have really been great for the rare disease community in terms of some of the policy solutions that are in there. It's certainly not a perfect document by any means, but I think that, for example, pre-existing coverage, being able to deny coverage based on pre-existing conditions when you live with a chronic, lifelong rare disease condition that's often high cost. Irrespective of drug treatment, just high cost with surgery and hospital, repealing pre-existing conditions is sort of something that will lock out people entirely from the insurance market. And many times people are disabled or unable to work, and so they're not going to qualify for good employer-based plans. Similarly, Medicaid expansion has been a really big deal for people with rare diseases. It's expanded access to care for a lot of folks that were, falling into this bucket where they didn't make enough to qualify they made too much to qualify for Medicaid, but they really couldn't afford their own insurance. And I think dealing with folks with rare diseases, that those trends are really important, that they've been trending in a positive direction, and in order to keep insurance coverage for these people, we have to keep those types of protections in whatever legislation gets passed. I think the other aspect of a trend is just there's been a lot more interest in drug development in the rare disease space, primarily because we've addressed so many unmet medical needs in larger disease categories that, and also the science has evolved. So I think as the science of genetics has evolved, these genetically based conditions, we can now figure out how to address in different ways than we ever could before. So now that we're able to address those with therapies, it becomes a question of, okay, now we have to launch them. They're going to be high priced. How do they get covered? And I think, that's something where the growth of companies has been phenomenal. There's a long-term sustainability level to it that I think everybody's a little concerned about. And I think there's this idea of, how do you best help these companies partner and communicate the value proposition of their product in the absence of a lot of data. In bigger disease states, we do these big health economic outcomes research studies, which will determine whether it's better than a comparator. Does it help improve the quality of life, and then at what cost per year? And those are the types of things that you deal with ex-US in the EU with health technology assessments. In the US, it's much different. It's it's a patchwork approach with private payers and government payers. But the question, I think, ultimately becomes, how do you demonstrate value when you can't necessarily do so in a well-metriced, standardized fashion like you would with diabetes? A lot of the benefits of these products accrue on an individual level in a very diverse group of people with the same genetic condition. So you almost have to answer it on an individual level, and that doesn't lend itself well to endpoints, doesn't lend itself well to big top-down studies or clinical trials. It lends itself well to individual patient experience and family experience and anecdotal evidence. So I think figuring out how to tell that story intrinsically involves the patient, it involves the family, it involves the physician, and those types of, and it involves the manufacturer, but those discussions then have to make its way to a payer. So I think people are evolving in terms of how you capture value for therapies.